The final chapter on JFK, Chapter 4, Segment 4, LBJ Part 2.
Welcome back to a continued segment on Lyndon Baines Johnson, character evidence. Let's pick up where we left off. Additionally, as we discussed before, Johnson drank. Personally, my opinion is he was a functioning alcoholic. He drank Cutty Shark all the time. He would drive on the roads in his Lincoln Continental, drinking Frosties, which were cold, ice cold beers. And he would go from spot to spot, even church to church, drinking his Frosties. If meeting constituents or attending a dinner interfered with Johnson's drinking, he would choose the drinking ahead of the appointment. And sometimes he would show up late, more than 2 hours, and he would berate everybody who had paid money to listen to him speak. Johnson would go after them, call them pissants, and everything else you could imagine because his practice was bullying. He was the oldest of 5 children, and he bullied every one of his siblings. He bullied all staff members, and that was his tactic. He would get up to someone, push against them, yell at them, scream at them in an attempt to get his way. Johnson followed whatever laws he wanted, and he did not honor any social rules. He would lift his shirt up to expose his belly and stitches to the press. He would attend functions at the White House outside, and he would use his Secret Service men as what he called pea shields, meaning he would get 2 agents near him and he would pee out in the bushes using the agents for cover. And there was an alert out that they should never react too quickly and too promptly to any person around the grounds late at night because it may be Lyndon Johnson peeing. Well, that may sound obscene. Johnson would also take his staff, particularly his press secretary, a fellow by the name of George Reedy, and he would hold bathroom sessions with his staff. This, of course, was a deliberate effort to show to everyone that Lyndon Johnson was the top dog. Of all the vulgar practices and acts that Lyndon Johnson ever did, I personally am amused by the one he did with the Prime Minister of Australia and the Prime Minister's wife. Johnson was sitting at a table with the Prime Minister and his wife. He came across a gristly piece of meat, took it out of his mouth, threw it across the room, and that gristled meat ended up on the Prime Minister's wife's plate. There has been an adage that there is nothing worse than a politician drunk with power. But in Johnson's case, the adage was much worse. He was a drunken politician with power, with a tremendous ego. Johnson's ego was so immense that he labeled everything around him. He emblazoned it on his cattle. His dogs were called LBJs. He put it on flags. He put it on his chairs. He put it on his cars. Johnson named a park after himself. He named a lake after himself. He named a space center after himself. He even named his wife, Lady Bird Johnson, LBJ, his good friend John Conley, Lyndon's boy John. Bobby Baker's youngest child was, of course, named Lyndon Baines Johnson Baker. He named his daughters, LBJ, Lucy Baines Johnson and Linda Bird Johnson. He was obsessed with himself, his ego, and becoming a great leader in a great society. He had such a terrible temper that he had something called a mad-on. And this wasn't the bullying where he would push up against people. This was an actual explosion. He would take a phone if it produced bad news and throw it against the wall or into a swimming pool. He would berate Secret Servicemen, grabbing them by their collar and yelling at them. He would scream at members of the public if they asked a question that he thought was inappropriate. Lyndon Johnson, by all accounts, was not a natural born leader, but rather a terrible leader. And according to NBC in 1960, when they looked and evaluated Lyndon Johnson, they said that Lyndon Johnson is a man incapable of governing America because of his ego, temper, and sarcasm. Now, Johnson's worst quality was he was a liar. And the problem was, when he was the bag man and he had the power over the Senate, he could get away with the lying. But not when he was in the center of the limelight with the entire press and public watching him. Johnson solely, single-handedly created something called the credibility gap, which is basically when the government's claims and statements do not match the truth. Johnson lied, according to Bobby Kennedy, even when he didn't have to. His staff actually sought advice from a psychiatrist, and they learned that Johnson's repeated lies over and over again is a psychiatric problem called mythomania, an abnormal propensity to lie, exaggerate, or twist the truth. Johnson lied and lied and lied. And with respect to that, he got America involved in the Vietnam War, and he made claims, first, that Kennedy was responsible, even though Kennedy had signed a withdrawal memorandum less than a month before he was killed. Johnson then blamed his staff, including the Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. The problem is that McNamara actually presented Johnson with a peace proposal in late 1965 that Johnson refused to agree to, and Johnson, in response, stepped up the war even more, and Robert McNamara actually resigned following that. To end this segment, let's have a look or a distillation of Lyndon Baines Johnson's character. Lyndon B. Johnson did anything and everything he wanted. He gratified his sexual impulses by repeated adulterous relationships. He quenched his thirst by out-drinking all rivals. He emptied his bladder wherever and whenever it was full. He advanced politically by cutthroat tactics that allowed him to steal everything from his first election in student council to his first U.S. Senate seat. Johnson was a political schemer. His standard practice was to do whatever he wanted to do and cover it up afterwards. He did this time and time again. Lyndon Johnson had the character, temperament, and immoral nature to eliminate anything obstructing his path to power. Now, would Johnson have the character to kill? Well, according to Johnson's good friend, Billy Saul Estes, who was involved in a scandal, Johnson was personally responsible for the killing of 2 people just in that scandal. And that was agricultural agent Henry Marshall. And are you ready for this? Billy Saul Estes' accountant. The only person that could link up all the financial shenanigans to Billy Saul and to Lyndon Baines Johnson. He ended up dead. Did he have the capacity to kill? Yes, absolutely. So let's continue to our next segment, which is the mob, who I believe definitely had the capacity to kill. See you then.